The entire 15 years that I've been at Guild Mortgage, I have known Miss Rosa Izzi. Mostly Rosa, because for the longest time, if I needed help and I was growing too fast and I needed processing or I needed underwriting, there was this angel in Albuquerque, New Mexico that said, sure, I'll help you, Shayla. And it was 5 years ago that you transitioned out of operations, 20 years at Guild Mortgage in operations as an underwriter, funder, closer, into becoming a commission-only salesperson, from non-producing manager to producing manager. And watch out, world, because Rosa Izzi continues to top the charts. In 2024, Rosa, you close 188 units for $53 million in little old New Mexico, Albuquerque, and some really small communities. Today, I'm so excited to have you on the Rainmaker podcast because, girl, you are a rainmaker. And I'm so excited to hear about your journey from operations into sales and how you've done that. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Shayla. It's my honor. I have been so honored and touched that you would take the opportunity to allow me this podcast and this talk. You know, I told you I wanted to share a really quick story. We all know 2019 was the last part of 2019, right before Christmas. There was a situation at Gill that was very taxing and stressful. And if you know, you know. And it had been a really, really difficult week. And that Wednesday, my sister reminded me that our little niece had her tonsils out and we needed to go to the hospital to visit her. And so she came to pick me up, which was unusual. We don't necessarily go a lot of places together. And you had sent out a video and I was playing it in the car and I played it out loud and not on purpose, just to play it out loud. And I was in the passenger seat and and you were telling us to stay the course. It's going to be okay. Better days are ahead. Let's keep moving. Don't let this defeat you. And my sister, who's a school teacher, special education school teacher, I look over and she's driving and she is into this podcast. She's like, that's right. And she's talking back to you and, you know, just completely inspired. And she said, who is that? I said, well, that's Shayla. And she says, who's Shayla? I said, Shayla is the heart and soul of this company. You really are. I really believe that. And I said, and she's so famous and such a legend in this industry that she goes by one name, like Madonna. You know, when you're known by one name, you have made it. And she said to me something quite interesting. She said, my gosh, you know, how blessed you are to have someone in your company who encourages you and sends out these videos, in whether they're good times or bad times. And she said, I wish there was a Shayla in the public school systems because it would revolutionize teachers and teaching, because that is such a profession that is constantly beat on. They could use encouragement. And she's since asked me to send your videos to her so she can be inspired. And when I told her, when we met up in Dallas and you said, will you be on my podcast? I said, I texted her. I said, oh my God, you'll never guess who asked me to be on her podcast. And I said, Shayla. And my sister wrote, the Shayla? Because what an honor. And I'm like, it really is an honor. So your reach is far and wide, and it's, and I truly mean it. I'm quite sincere when I say I'm very blessed to be here with you today.
Well, thank you. And I remember that video and I remember that moment because our systems went down for 2 days and we couldn't fund loans. And it was the end of the year. I had vertigo. I was laid up in bed, literally in the dark for 7 days. I definitely hit my own personal wall, if you will. And I didn't know if I was ever going to see straight again. And then, of course, the business is blowing up and our pets' heads are falling off. And I'm like, I just got to get on video and send a positive note to our sales team because I needed it for myself. And back then, you know, I started the coaching company at Guild because when I got coached, everything changed for me. I was the same girl that was just as driven and hungry and gritty and motivated. But when I got a coach and I had a plan and I was guided, all of a sudden my business took off and I started doubling and tripling, quadrupling. And I just always felt I have to give this back Because if I'm the same girl that all of a sudden was stuck and then had this transformation, I want to turn around and do that for other people, which is exactly why we're on the Rainmaker podcast here. Because Rosa, you have such a unique story, and I'm so excited to dig in and peel it apart. I'm sure there's tons of people on this call and listening that are technicians that love solving problems and love the intricacies of doing the loan. Because let's be real, there's a new challenge every day in the mortgage business because no customer and nobody's situation is the same. And the challenge for a lot of technicians is that they love being behind their desk and they love being in the files and in the paperwork. And this market has been punishing to my fellow technicians because if they haven't been out there leveraging their archetype and selling and promoting and asking for business and building relationships, their business has really gone backwards. And that is not your story. You went from 155 closings in 2023 to 188 closings. So you grew by 29% in one of the toughest markets, and you run a branch and you come from it as operations. So I've got to ask you, why did you decide to, after 20 years of being in operations, switch over to the seat of producing branch manager and start becoming a loan officer? What was that change? What was that decision for you?
Well, that's a great question. And it actually involves you as well. 2016, 2017, Andy Stewart reached out and he said, hey, we need some offloads. Would you be able to take them? And they came from everywhere: Arizona, Nevada, Washington, Oregon, California, really the entire Western United States. And I decided to take it on. At that point, we had been with Guild for about 15 years, and I wanted to raise our profile within the company. The company had grown so much. When we started 25 years ago, we were 450 employees, and that included the corporate employees. We were branch number 9. I think we're over 600 branches.
Wow.
So I wanted to raise our profile in the company. And I also wanted to learn, after 15 years, you can get stale and you can be very good at it. But what if there are more efficient ways, more effective ways? And we had kind of been isolated from the group. And so I thought this is a great opportunity to learn more. And we did. We took those offloads on. And we learned a lot. And I remember we went to Reno at one of Andy's sales rallies. And you approached me and you thanked me for helping with the offloads. And you said something to me that planted a seed. And I'll never forget it. We were like at the Mixa, the little meet and greet. You said, Rosa, you have your operations down. If you can match that with production, you'd crush it. And I never forgot that. And I thought, well, how would I go about doing it? And it really did plant a seed. I thought, I can't do it. I need to probably hire. I didn't believe in myself because I sort of bought into loan officer talk. And it doesn't matter if it's a good market, an even market, a bad market. Loan officers are always saying it's so hard, it's so hard, it's so hard. And I believed it. I watched it for 20 years. So it's the end of 2019 and Andy Stewart's on the line with me and he says, we need to recruit. And I flippantly, and I'm not a flippant person, say, well, Andy, I'm going to recruit myself. And, if you know Andy, he's like a rubber band. He's like, let's go, let's do it. And I was like, oh my God, what have I done? I don't know what I'm doing. And I immediately went into fear and anxiety. But I had kind of made a promise now to Andy that I could do it. And I went into anxiety, and I'm not necessarily an anxious person by nature, but I thought, what am I going to do? I'm going to make a fool of myself. And I remember thinking, what would Shayla do? Oh. Shayla would say, and I'd watched you all of these years and your generosity of spirit. I don't know many companies or a company where a producer like you, someone just so successful, shares her knowledge. And it's not just, do as I say, it's do as I do, and your vulnerability and, this works and this hasn't worked, and you just share it with people. I think it's so unique, and you used to share it with everyone, and I would pay attention, and I would tell loan officers, I'd say, this gal works in a market a third the size our market and dominates. I said, you do what she tells you to do. She's here telling you, do these things. And you know how loan officers are, yeah, yeah, yeah. But I always kept that. And so I thought, what would Shayla do? I've been listening to her. I preach that people should follow what she says. And I thought, well, the first thing I should do is a goal. And I thought, well, I don't know if I have a goal. I don't even have a plan. And so I thought, well, okay, it's March of 2020. There's this noise about a pandemic. That was all sort of in the background. And I thought, well, I said, this is my goal. By December, I'm going to be at 4 units. And I thought, holy moly, that's huge because I don't have anything right now. And I remembered one of the things that I've always admired about you is how you will lean into vulnerability. And I've never really seen someone as successful in sales lean into vulnerability. And I thought, well, I know a few agents. I knew one agent in particular. He still does, the largest team in the state. And I knew him long before he became a realtor. So I rang him and I said, hey, I'm trying something new. I have something to prove to myself. I said, will you help me?
Oh.
And he said, yes. I was like, wow. And I said, I just want one opportunity. And from there, I gained enough confidence to start asking the 2 or 3 other people that I knew. And then we all went home. And New Mexico was locked down for a lot longer than a lot of other places. And so from my home, I started making calls. Again, you'll remember that time there was a refinance boom.
Oh, yeah.
The largest in history, probably. I refinanced my friends and my family. So I just started calling people, people who I knew of them. I, maybe worked with them in my operational role. And I just said, hey, I'm trying something new. Everyone else is focused on refinances. I don't have any really. And I started, do my Tuesday updates and make my calls. And I was getting a lot of great feedback. And from there is where I started building on it and making, I knew I had to bring a value proposition. And my value proposition was, hey, I know how to underwrite loans. I know how to close loans. So when I pre-qualify someone, pretty much they're pre-underwritten and pre-approved. And I just built my network that way. And I built my reputation that way. And when you've been somewhere for so long, people know where to find you, right? I always say It's not who you know, it's who knows you.
Right.
And so they always knew they could find me at Guild. And I really parlayed that I'm here, I'm used to 40 hours a week in front of a computer. I'll always answer my emails, my phone calls, my texts. And so I think that discipline with a bit of confidence allowed me to, and I was telling you earlier, I've become shameless. I talked to, just about an hour ago, a realtor. He gives me about 7 or 8 transactions a year. He does, doesn't do this full time, rang me with a question. And I said, hey, I need another deal from you. And he said, I'm working on it, Rosa. And so I just, I don't say shameless. I mean, I say that, but I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just, I ask for it now.
I love that you're using that word because I've always said bold, but there's a lot of humor in saying, look, I'm shameless. I need a deal. You got a deal for me. Let's go.
Right.
And so I want to talk really quickly a little bit more about what you had shared with me, that you were painfully shy. And this might have been one of the reasons that you did not go into sales or avoided sales for so long. So how do you go from painfully shy to shameless? What do you think have been those couple steps that have gotten you from here to there to be a $50 million producer?
I think it's confidence in knowing your craft and knowing that, I can say something and it come to fruition. I'm not just throwing something at a wall and hoping that it sticks. I know my guidelines. I know I'm a great technician in that way. And so if I give you my word that something will happen, it'll happen. And I think that confidence, and then just this extraordinary company that I work for, where I've had so much help and so much encouragement. And yes, you can do this. And then when you start tasting the success, right, you start realizing people really want to work with you. That elevates you to a in a way where you can create your own method and your own process that works and serves me without me having to jump so far outside of my comfort zone where I will go into an anxiety, where I don't feel comfortable. I find sometimes, and I took a class many years ago, it was the psychology of happiness. It was a fascinating class, and what they spoke about was finding genius within your comfort zone. So you sort of turn it on its head, your skill set, and how do you leverage your skill set? And that's what I did. I leveraged my skill set, and it opened up. It opened me up a little bit and a little bit more, so that I didn't have to feel that I had to hide.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think that is exactly what this Rainmaker movement is about, right? It's me saying you have all the genius within you. You have what it takes.
Yes.
It was like just me getting in your face in 2016 saying, "Hey, Rosa, you know, you got it," right?
Yes.
And then you going, "Oh, I do? Wait a minute. Huh?" So talk to me about when I said right away, how did you decide to become a salesperson? You're like, I don't think of myself as a salesperson. How do you think of yourself that gives you that confidence?
An educator, a consultant. I mean, that's how I approach all my clients and how I approach my referral partners, is that, I will answer your question if it takes a million times you answering it. I've also taught in the past, so I've brought those teaching skills to the table as well. And if you look at my reviews, you'll see the consistency is she always answered my calls. She always answered my questions. She explained things in a manner that I understood. And I think that just comes with time and being confident in your abilities. Yeah. So that's how I approach it. And I always tell, I'm sorry?
Sorry, it's interesting because you had said, yeah, I thought of salespeople as like charming and dynamic
yes.
and charismatic. Well, guess what? Somebody who is firmly in their strengths and working in their zone of genius and pushing the comfort zone, because I want to go into that next. That is a dynamic, attractive person because you are in your lane and being the biggest version of yourself as an educator and as a technician. We might not see it that way when we look at ourselves in the mirror because we're comparing ourselves and saying, oh, I could never be like Barry Horn or like Andy or, these other people. But you have done that, which is just so incredibly beautiful to see. I want to talk about the two archetypes. Your primary is obviously technician. You come from operations. You're very technically minded. But I also say technicians are strategic. So as I unwind your thought process, I see a ton of strategy in there, which is like, okay, what do people need? And what is the hole in the market? What is my value to them? And how do I do that? So technician is very obvious for you. But I also say that in order to get scale and to grow in your business, you have to use your secondary archetype. And for you, it was networker, or it is networker. And you've used networking to bring, you might open the door with technician and close the door with networking, or open the door as a networker and close it with your technical abilities. But you're kind of using both ends of the scale to really get growth and scale in your business. So my question for you is, what were some of those strategic decisions you've made that helped you get the traction? In addition to calling your very comfortable friends, what did you do after that had to really stretch you?
Well, one of the things was the Tuesday update. I thought, well, this is a great, one of the things I've always heard from agents and from loan officers, and I would field the complaint calls as the manager. They didn't return my call. No one's heard from this loan officer in weeks. And, loan officers tend to, if something goes wrong, bury their head in the sand, and then it becomes a real problem. So I thought, the Tuesday update was right up my alley, and I didn't want to do calls. So I did it just very simple, and it's listing agent and selling agent. And it's just very simple. File is an underwriting, appraisal audit, or, appraisal in, no lender issues, file is out of underwriting, minimal conditions, reviewed with client, very, on a very macro level. Well, that started opening up who I am to the listing agent. And I would get more feedback from the listing agent than even the buyer's agent. And one day I received an email. It was in early 2020, probably April or May, and the listing agent said, "Hey, I like the way you do business. Would you, would you like to work with me?" And I thought, "Oh my God, yes." And I started building on that. And so I've met more listing agents. I've met more agents that then I will take to a coffee or to a lunch based on feedback throughout the transaction. When the CD goes out, I let everybody know CD out. I do a CD call, which is probably, or a preparation for closing call, which has probably, I've probably done more business and become very well known that my clients go to closing and they know there's no surprises at closing. They're prepared for closing. And it's at that time I will ask, "Hey, if you believe I did a good job, I'm going to ask two favors of you. One, will you let the referral partner know? And two, you're going to get a survey. Will you let my VP know?" And yes, absolutely. And so when I do get that feedback from the client, I will pass it along to both agents just to, and thanking them. "Hey, this client was really happy. It's a great house." And it has opened up a lot of doors just from an email, from a series of emails. So I took that sort of, that technician part of me that wants to make sure everybody knows what's happening and sort of marketed it in a way to get me in front of people.
Yep. Yep. And then you become known in circles and people introduce people. So Albuquerque, how big is this market? Did you grow in Albuquerque, or what were some of your strategies to gain traction in and around Albuquerque?
So Albuquerque is located in the center of the state. The majority of population is here. The state's about 2.5 million, and about 1 million right here in the central part of the state. There are 3 counties: Valencia, Bernalillo, and Sandoval County. And I knew in 2020 that, man, this is a really hyper competitive market. And I had some people who I knew in smaller markets. So Santa Rosa, New Mexico, town of 2,000, about an hour and a half from here. Carol is just an incredible human being, let alone wonderful real estate agent. It's from there. And we do about 20 to 25 units a year in this little town. And I knew that there wasn't, a lot of people overlook the smaller towns. And there's such a need for a really good realtor and a really good loan officer. And with technology, everything is done on the internet anyway. So it's not, you have to physically be there. Raton, New Mexico, I have a friend, Wendy. She's from Raton, born and bred, and she's a realtor there. It's on the border with Colorado. And we do 2 or 3 transactions a month out of Raton. I remember one time I asked her, I said, "Honey," I said, "I have to ask you a question." I said, "I don't mean to be terrible, but why Raton? Why do people move there? It's this like sleepy little town." And she laughed, and it's a town that where mining was big so many years ago. It's an old mining town, and it's on the way. If you go from Albuquerque to Denver, you kind of just drive through there. On your the other side of the border is Pueblo. And she said, "Well, people want to live in Colorado and don't want to pay the Colorado prices, so they live in New Mexico and they get the best of both." But she laughed because I was like, the amount of business in some of these small towns that no one pays attention to, even Farmington, New Mexico. It's a big oil town. I do quite a bit of business down in southeastern New Mexico, and I've never met these referral partners.
So let me ask you this. You're calling them friends now, but were they friends first when you were in operations and you tapped on them, or did you network and meet them in these small towns and turn them into friends?
Well, Carol was a friend, and Wendy I knew through operations. She's now become my friend. Okay. But I reached out to her and I said, "Hey, I know I saved a couple or helped save a few deals over the years. I'm now an originator." And she's like, "Sure, I'll be happy to help you." So they became a friend. Some of these other people who I work with, I've never met.
Wow.
But they still, in some of these towns, if you can get 7, 8, 9 transactions a year out of a small town and they're USDA and very, I find a certain degree of gratitude.
Yes.
Because they're like, thank you for helping. I didn't know that I could ever buy a house. Today we closed a police officer in Raton, and he was in tears. He's like, I never thought I would have this opportunity.
Oh,
Because it's not, there isn't the marketing in these small towns. There's a lot that goes on in big cities, and a lot of people don't really go on the internet. Some of these small towns have terrible internet access, so they don't even believe that they can do or can buy a house. But I think that is such an untapped market in a lot of the states that our company is in.
And like you said, too, if there is a loan officer that's worked a small market, often they are not coached. They are not working a plan. They're not consistent in how their lead intake process goes, their quality of a pre-approval, their post-closing process. They're just not dialed in. So you bring those strategies and that technical prowess that you have, and like game over for the other people who've been lazy and stale. So out of these 188 transactions last year, you told me that you have 5 agents that I would consider channel accounts, whales that close 15 to 20 units a year with you. You've got 4 or 5 that give you, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 a year. And then you've got some onesie twosies. Like, how the heck did you find 5 whales that give you that much business as real estate agents and then keep them?
Like I said, my value proposition. Well, let me back up. A few years ago, there's a very well-known real estate agent, and he has a big team, and one of his teammates does very well, and he's one of my whales. We had gone to some charity fashion show, and it was for the Women's Council of Realtors, and this was before I even became a loan officer. He pulled me aside and he said, the reason why I don't use one of your loan officers, and this loan officer isn't here anymore, it's like, she's a lot of fun to go to happy hour with, and she makes all these promises, and she wants to be friends, she wants to be, go to dinner and with me and my wife. And he said, but I have friends and I have family. I'm just looking for someone who'll just help me with my business. And I said, well, I'll be happy to. I said, because I have my own friends, I have my own family. I'm not looking for any of that. I'm just looking to help you close transactions. And that very first person I called when I decided to become a loan officer, he said, I will help you. He said, I'm going to come see you. This is a true story. So I thought, oh my God, he's going to come to the office to visit me. And I said, I'm going to have my little packet ready. My flyers and my name and the programs. And it took me 2 days to figure out how to do that through Salesforce. And I had my packet ready, and he came in and I had my packet ready. So I opened my packet and I lifted the fly and I said, this is the 3, 2, 1 program. And I felt like I was Vanna White,
Yeah.
And he said, Rosa, stop. And I was like, oh my God, what did I say? I sort of sat back in my chair. And he said, I don't care about your rates. I don't care about your programs. You know what I care about? I care that you do your job. Sick and tired of doing the loan officer's job. I just want you to do your job. I want to do my job. And I shut my folder and I sat back and I sat up and I said, that's all I want to do is my job. And I will promise you I will do my job so that you can get on to the next one and the next one. And that's what I started to realize. That's what referral partners were looking for.
Yeah.
They weren't looking for let's go golfing, let's go to happy hour. They were just looking for someone who's going to answer their phones. If they call me, I know what's going on with the transaction. They just want answers. They want to be able to close their transactions, have happy customers, and move on to the next. And I realized I'm that person. So that's how I've been able to keep them. And I have not, thankfully, disappointed them yet. I have not, like I said, I do not commit to being able to do a loan until I know that I can.
Great.
So I always say, take a half hour up front. And I know people are always eager for answers. they want to go see a house, about the pre-qualification. Take a half hour up front, make sure you have your income done, make sure that you've gone over everything. Because when you issue that pre-approval letter, subject to, something completely out of your control,
Right.
you are, you're going to get it to closing.
I'm so glad you said that. And I hope that this is music to all the technicians' ears, because it is true. If you do a damn good job and you partner with the right people, that's what they value, you will do business over and over and over again. Just being hot and cold and thinking, well, that person's on social media and I need to be like them and I need to do this. Like, no, you need to be you and do it very, very well. The interesting thing is you probably, if he took this sales archetype, and I'm going to challenge you, Rosa, to have him take this 4-minute survey and just find out what his archetype is, because I would be not shocked if he was also a technician, because, usually we need to partner with people who have the strengths that we don't have, or that get it, that they're a technician, I'm a technician. And it sounds to me like he's a technician who's really focused on the efficiency and process and details and doing a damn good job on his end. And his expectation is he needs a partner that thinks and acts and behaves the same way on your end. It'd be interesting to see his secondary. Is he a storyteller as a marketer? Is he a trust builder and he goes one-to-one to grow his business? Is he a networker? Be kind of interesting to see that. But does that resonate for you? Do you think that you and he got each other because you're both technicians?
I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. He's a former appraiser.
Yeah, there you go.
He has told me I know everything. I bet I've been at every house in this town. He is really detail oriented when it comes to his listings and how he approaches his clients. Absolutely. He knows a lot about this end of it as well. So you were spot on.
So let me ask you about your other whales. If you were to think about these other individuals, do you think they're all technicians, or are some of them not very technical at all and they rely on you to save their butts, and that's why they rely and count on you over and over again?
Probably a mix of both. And when I think about who they are, I know they don't have a huge social media presence either. They do very, very well just networking. I know some of them have other jobs as well. One has a full-time job at HP, Hewlett Packard, and a lot of transactions come out of there. I mean, he dominates in the real estate market, and, he has another job.
Wow.
Where he has to be, a technician on that job. So I think that there's a lot of that as well, they're not that wow, that whole branding that is just sort of in your face. They're just very quiet behind the scenes, and they just dominate in real estate.
So I just want to finish up with talking about what fuels you, because often the fuel that we have as loan officers is we've got something to prove. You made a commitment to yourself. You shared that part of your story. We might have a chip on our shoulder because, like me, I'm a college dropout. My parents were entrepreneurs and they figured out how to become self-made, and I want to do the same thing. And for others, it's they want to provide for family, and they've got very clear things that drive them and get them out of bed each morning and charging ahead. What was it for you in the beginning, and what is it for you now that keeps fueling you, Rosa? After 25 years at Gill Mortgage and closing 188 deals and always answering your phone and getting involved with pre-approvals, this is a lot. How do you keep your juice and your energy and your zest for doing what we do?
Well, thank you. Part of what my decision to move from operations into production came from burnout. I remember thinking, oh my God, if I have to look at another VOE again, I'm going to lose my mind. I think it was the challenge. I am in the sunset of my career, and I wanted to, go out on top. And I know that sounds, I don't mean it to sound arrogant, but I wanted to have like a 365-degree career where everything I learned allowed me now to actually make a difference. And not that I wasn't making a difference before, but a difference that I can see and hear and read about, and just being able to help people. I know that sounds cliche, but it's the truth. And just seeing that success at the end, it's a different gratification. And knowing that people trust you and that you take care of their trust, whether it's a referral partner or a client, it does something to you. It gives you a certain sense of peace that you've worked your whole life on your reputation and that it matters and that it's a good reputation. And that right now, above everything else, matters more than everything else, that my reputation, that I'm ambassador of a certain brand, and that it's a good reputation. How much better to close out a career than that?
Oh, mic drop. And I would just say this to everybody listening. The average loan officer in America, over 65% of loan officers have been doing this career for 21 years. So there's a lot of burnout out there. There's a lot of limiting beliefs and whiny stories, and it is so hard. And there's a lot of people going, I have to make these next 5 years count. It is my last swan song. Like, it's go time, baby. So do you have any final goals in this sunset part of your career? Is there like a unit number per month you're trying to get? Is there like a volume? Is there, you're number 19 in the country for Gill Mortgage, lady. So at a little old Albuquerque and these small towns around New Mexico, you not only like saved me operationally and been such an amazing partner, but now here you are standing on chairman stages and doing this. But any other fun goals that you're like, ooh, it'd be so cool if I could do this or that?
I do want to. So I average about 15 to 17 units a month. I always do units because that's the operations in us, but I want to get to 20, 25 units. I want to, really help as many people as I can. I also want to build the future loan officers. I have some people who I'm mentoring, and I'm just going to teach them everything that I know. And I always say this, especially the last few years, there's so much noise out there. You need to drown. Everyone who knows, I say this repeatedly, drown out the noise, because there's so much opportunity. When I meet with referral partners, sometimes they'll ask, how's the market? I say, the market's great. I'm like, oh my God, I haven't heard that from a loan officer in years. And I'm like, because it is great. It's all about perception. It's out there. People still need to buy homes. Those life events haven't changed. And I know we hear about over and over, but you also have to understand it. You have to believe it.
Yes.
There's so much, some people just blow off certain things that you say, oh, yeah, there's a lot of noise, but it's what you believe. And I really believe, I'm the daughter of immigrants. I really believe this, and I know this. I mean, my family came from abject poverty. Like, granted, it was in Italy, but there are plenty of people here pull themselves up from poverty. I believe the great equalizers are education and home ownership. And this idea, and Terry Schmidt, I think I moved her to tears. We had a little retirement party for Marianne McGarry a few years ago. When I started at Guild, those ladies were my immediate supervisors. So I grew up with them. And we had this party up at the top of a casino here with a beautiful vista. And I said, as the daughter of immigrants, this idea that if you work towards home ownership, that anyone can have a little corner of the world really to call their own, really is the promise of America. And it really represents the greatness of this country. And as the daughter of immigrants, I know that I've seen that. So for me to know that, hey, we are helping people move the needle for real. And it is the promise of America that you can own a home. And it represents the best of America. And I know that sounds very cliche, but it's very true. And so that has been my mantra, and I preach that all the time. And that's really the next couple of years for me. That's about 5 years. You nailed it. Is going to be just building that reputation and knowing that somewhere out there, we have actually, as I said, I've seen it firsthand in my own family, what this has done for people, what this idea of owning a home has done. It's not just a number. It's not just a metric. It's not just this, it's the American dream, which sounds very cliche and very trite, but it's very real. And it's up to us to make sure we keep that alive.
Well, I'm a realtor. I'm in on working with Rosa. I'm giving her my clients because I can tell she's got care. She's got passion. She's minding the details. She's going to show up. She's got a personal why, a chip on her shoulder of a challenge to herself. She's vulnerable and asking for help. And she has this passion and belief and conviction that homeownership is a good thing. And your heart, Rosa, is the true secret weapon.
Thank you.
And I hope that everybody who listened to this episode feels like not only inspired, but like a true knowing deep within them that if you can do it and I can do it, they can do it.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's just remembering that you do have that wisdom and that talent within you, and you just got to get out there and be shameless and ask for it. So last thing to leave these guys with: you're running into me at the grocery store, or you're calling me as a realtor. How does it sound in Rosa's voice to be shameless?
Hey, send me a deal. Let's work together again.
Okay.
Straight to the point. You know what I always get? Absolutely. I'll call you tomorrow.
Well, any final thoughts, Rosa?
Well, I appreciate this so much, and I am so honored. And thank you again, Shayla, for everything that you have done. I don't know how much we realize the effect we have on people sometimes, whether it's a passing word or that time in Reno when you said you've got part of it down, nail the other part, and it planted a seed that I never forgot. And it took a moment where I just talk about getting out of my comfort zone, because I'm not generally flippant. I'm like, I'm just going to hire myself, Andy Stewart. And there, I'll show you. And then went, holy moly, what am I doing? But I want to thank you for everything that you have ever done. You have been a tremendous inspiration for me. And I'm just forever grateful to know you and to call you friend. And again, Shayla, one word, you are extraordinary, and your gifts, and really, my friend, your generosity of spirit is unmatched. It is unmatched. And you actually inspire me to be a better person.
Thank you. And ditto, your generosity of taking on my loans and operations was one I could never imagine taking on. And then it just goes, if you wouldn't have made that decision, if you wouldn't have taken that seed and sprouted it, think of the ripple effect and how many people in those small towns that have gotten USDA loans wouldn't have been impacted. And so I guess that's a final thought we'll leave the listener with is, well, what if you don't? What if you stay playing small? What if you don't lean into your natural gifts? What if you don't get uncomfortable? What is the negative impact of that? Who is going to be cheated because they're not getting your love and brilliance and attention in the world? Now is the time to be a rainmaker, to step into the light, to get uncomfortable, to make those calls and be shameless. Rosa Izzi, this was a fabulous episode, and I love spending time with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my friend. We will talk soon. Thank you again.
Have a great day.
You too.